Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the CFR webinar for the 2020 calendar year consolidated fiscal report. This is our first time presenting to the calendar year filers in this fashion, so we hope it is beneficial for you. We had good feedback from the fiscal year filers, which was our first time conducting the webinar. We worked out all the kinks, and hopefully this helps you all prepare a complete and accurate CFR. As I mentioned before, we have approximately 765 attendees today spread throughout all the different agencies that require CFR. So we have a pretty big crowd, and hopefully we don't run into too many more issues. We do have good news today. SED will be presenting. They will be presenting at the, and therefore we'll be presenting information regarding SED programs. Also, these webinar sessions will be recorded and posted online. We will send out an email to all providers notifying them of when they are available and when they can be found. My name is Ken Glenmeyer. I work for OPWDD, and I will be the host for the two webinars we have scheduled this week. Today's panelists will be as follows. Representing OASIS, it's Paul Green and Paul Sutton. Representing OMH is James Shelker, Michelle Cholinsky, Kathy Katz. Representing OPWDD is Francis Vasilio, Alpha Amin, and myself. Representing SED is Jahida Benatar and Nelly Gutos. Representing Department of Health is Jeffrey Nickerson. Also, we have a survey that will pop up at the end of the event. We would greatly appreciate you guys taking the time to fill that out so we can make these trainings better for you guys. One of the important factors of this WebEx is the ability to ask questions. We strongly encourage all attendees to ask questions through the Q&A function in the webinar. It's on your right-hand side, and you might have to click the arrow next to the Q&A to open up the dialog box. If you don't see it, you might have to click the three dots at the bottom of the WebEx and then click Q&A. We will not be addressing questions today, but we do plan on answering all questions and posting answers online, along with a recording of this webinar so that you could get the benefit of the webinar and the questions asked. Another important topic I think is important to bring up is due to the current pandemic, we have added new schedules to help us understand the impact of COVID has on each provider. These schedules are called COVID-19 and COVID-19S. After this current webinar has been completed, I would recommend scrolling through the presentation to slide 287 and reading through the section so that you can make sure you have all your questions asked in tomorrow's session. Some contact information for each provider. Most agencies prefer the email contact, especially now that some of us are working from home. It's easier for us to maintain an email. We do look at our voicemails as well, and we try to keep up on the phone, but email is going to be the best contact for pretty much every agency. We also included CFR claims contact information. These are the different people you could reach out to. Once again, email is probably the best bet. And the next, these are the goals that we want to accomplish in today's webinar. We want to introduce providers to the CFR manual and the CFR reporting software. We want to provide New York State agency contact information for specific questions not covered during this training session. We want to help providers become familiar with the CFR core reports. We also want to discuss important policies, principles, and rules regarding the completion of the CFR. And I will hand this off to the next presenter, and I appreciate you guys joining.
Hello, as Ken said earlier, my name is Francis Vasilio. I work for OPWDD in the CFR unit. The first step in the CFR process each year, and a step that's too often skipped, is to review the CFR manual. The manual consists of 9 overview sections. There's one for each of the core schedules, each of the claiming schedules, and each of the supplemental schedules. There are also numerous appendices containing detailed information. For instance, Appendix G includes information about every program OPWDD funds, and it allows you to find out things like what to use as a funding source code or site code, things like that. The manuals are available at the website listed on the slide. This is the New York State Ed CFR page, and as you can see, there's an opportunity there for you to download the manual onto your computer or the appendices. There's also the advantage there that you can look back to previous reporting periods. So if you have to go back and revise CFR from 2 cycles ago and you need to check on something, you can go back and pull up that manual to look and get some more information that you may need. The purpose of the CFR is to have information consistently reported by all the provider agencies. We use this information for rate and fee setting purposes, also for cost of living increases, and it's used by the governor's office, the DOB, and by the different state agencies in developing our policies and priorities. For many of you providers, the state aid claiming documents, which are part of the CFR, are important to be able to close out your contracts. For those of you who are not accountants, the CFR, for full CFR purposes, for full CFRs, must be reported CFR 1 through 6 in the DMH-1 in full accrual. If you're doing the DMH-2 and DMH-3 claiming schedules, you have options there to report as accrual, modified accrual, or cash basis. And if you're filing a mini abbreviated CFR, you have all those options as well. Now, when I say accrual, that means that you need to account for your revenue at the time it's earned rather than the time you receive it from the state. You need to record your expenses at the time that they're incurred, and the units of service at the time they're provided. So you may provide a service in December, you may bill for it in January, you hope to get paid by March. All that should be in your calendar CFR. Keep in mind that your salary expense is at the time your employees earn it, so as opposed to the date on their paycheck. So the payroll reports that you do for the state and federal government will not necessarily correspond with the data you report in your CFR. There are 4 types of CFRs. There's the full CFR, abbreviated, Article 28 abbreviated, and the mini abbreviated. The type of CFR you're required to file is dependent on the programs that you offer and the type of funding you receive. If you check Section 2 of the CFR manual, there are a series of matrices that you go through answering questions, and that'll allow you to find out the type of CFR you're required to use to report, and also what other accompanying documents are required. As you go through these matrices, you may meet the criteria for, you may be funded by multiple state agencies, and you may meet the requirement for a full CFR by one agency. Well, that means you're going to be reporting a full CFR that covers all the state agencies. And keep in mind that if you get $1 of Medicaid funding, that triggers a full CFR for OPWDD. This is one of these. This is one matrix that I was describing. This is the combination matrix where you go through and answer questions, follow the arrows depending on whether you answered yes or no, and you'll see there's a list there of what's required for filing. After this combination matrix, you'll find an individual matrix for each of the state agencies that you can take a look at for more detail as well. This CFR training is geared towards completion of the calendar 2020 CFR. For most provider agencies that are headquartered in Nassau or Suffolk County on Long Island or north of New York City, you are required to file a calendar CFR. And all the programs that you're funded by the 6 CFR agencies are all consolidated into one CFR that you file. Some of you are lucky enough that you get to do this twice a year, and that may be because you're located in Westchester County, but you're offering a program funded through a contract administered through the New York City DDRO for our agency. This program is offered in the Bronx, so they're supervising it. In that case, you get to file 2 CFRs a year. In that case, the secondary CFR that you file is a mini abbreviated CFR, so it's a little easier on you. Due dates. Although we've extended the due dates for the 2 most recent reporting periods, at this point, we're still geared towards having calendar 2020 CFRs filed by the regular due date. For OMH and SED, that's May 1st, although you have the option of going online and requesting an automatic extension to June 1st. For the other state agencies, OASIS, OPWDD, DOH, and OCFS, the deadline is June 1st, and there's no option to seek an extension. There are penalties for missing the due dates. And this is really important for those of you who are responsible in your organization for getting these things filed. The due date for OASIS, or the penalties for OASIS, are outlined in the fiscal guidelines available by that agency. I'm not going to get into the details for other agencies. If you look here at OMH, you see the where you can find the penalties in their regulations for how that works for them. OPWDD, my agency, has probably the stiffest penalties. And the way it works is if you have not filed not just the CFR, but the financial statements and the certification pages, and they're not all received in the Albany office by the deadline, you could be subject to a 2% penalty. This penalty, even if you come into compliance within a week, extends for the entire month, and it's 2% of your Medicaid billings, and you never get that back. It's non-refundable. Furthermore, if you have not filed your CFR, a calendar CFR, by August 1st, the federal government has told us they're no longer going to fund your agency. And since half the money for Medicaid comes from them, that means we cut your rates by 50%. And that's not an idle threat. We've done it. So it's very important that those of you responsible for submitting the CFR have a system in place and that you can get the information you need from the people who do the billing, if you're a larger agency and it's not you, from the people who run the programs to get information to you about hours, the payroll department, the salaries, the hours worked. It's important that you have a process in place where your accountants can get all the information they need to produce financial statements and to get them back to you in time for your board of directors to approve them. And then it's also important that you have the CFR completed in time for those accountants to certify the CFR if that's a requirement. So you need to have a plan in place. If you're new to this, you need to go back to the office and talk to the people who are going to have to give you all the information you need and let them know how important these deadlines are. SED also has penalties, and you can find the details of their penalties. Some of them are listed right there. And I don't know the details because I don't file with SED. If you have programs that are partially or wholly funded through the county, New York City, you need to check with them, especially if you're applying for an extension on your deadline to file, just to make sure it's okay with all these other agencies, other funders, as to when you're going to be filing. Don't just make assumptions that everything is going to be fine with them. Submission requirements. We want you to use the CFR program to upload all the documents if possible. That's the CFR, that's the financial statements, that's the certification pages. You go in, you find that way to upload. We'll go through that in detail later, but it's off the utility tab in the program. If you're funded by multiple state agencies, this way you don't have to go find a way, an address to get certifications to different places. You can just do this one step. Now, you may still have to send information separately to regional offices that supervise your contracts, but this will take care of all the CFR units in Albany. It is possible sometimes for you to email the signed certification copies or financial statements if necessary. We really discourage you mailing paper copies. We're trying to get everything paperless if we can here. DOH and OCFS will only accept your certifications and financials if they're uploaded through the program. Again, it's to your advantage to use that process because it'll cover all the state agencies involved. For those of you who printed out the handout that was emailed, you'll see all the information as to where those certifications can be emailed. Sometimes you're asked to revise your CFR. That's pretty common, actually. There's a whole group of us for different agencies reviewing your CFR, and at different times you'll be asked to make revisions. For several of the agencies, we just require you to give us a new CFR-iv, OASIS, and SED. You may be required to submit a CFR-iii or III as well, a new one for the new CFR. In those cases, you may want to check with them first, because if you've just made a minor change for another state agency, they may or may not require you to submit to go back to your accountants for a new II. If you are emailing, we give you the way we'd like you to name in the subject line of your email what it is you're sending us. It makes it easier for us to identify what it is and to get it to the appropriate location. I want to talk about financial statements for a minute. For one thing, even if you've revised the CFR multiple times, you only have to give us the financial statements once per cycle. The financial statements cannot be a draft financial statement. So if your board hasn't accepted it yet, don't send us that. It's like you didn't send us anything. Make sure you get it back from your accountants in time that you can have your board approve it. If you're filing a mini abbreviated CFR, you're not actually required to give us financial statements. using the program, you can also go in through the tab and upload previous year's financial statements if you need to do that for some reason. It's preferred that your financial statement have the same beginning and end date as your reporting period for the CFR, but we know that's not always the case. If you have a different cycle for your financial statements, you have to give us the financial statement with an end date that falls in that 12-month period covered by the CFR. The software is free. It's available through the OMH website. You see the web address there. You can go there and to download. It's really not intended for servers. It should be on a PC. You may want to back up. You're recommended to back up the data files onto servers, but the program itself works best on a PC. There's also problems when people try to run this on an Apple computer. Just to let you know, we're in the process of developing a new web-based CFR. Perhaps the next time you do this, that'll be what you're working on. It'll be set up very similar, but that'll avoid some of the problems we're having. A lot of people have installed firewalls and other complicating safeguards on their computer networks and their agencies, and it makes it difficult sometimes to get the CFR to work. If that's the case, we have the helpline, and these are the people who write the programming, and they are going to be more help than us usually, the CFR analysts, in helping you to get it to work on your computer. One thing I will tell you, though, once you download it, you have an icon, you click on it, it should open. If it doesn't, you should right-click on the icon, and one of the options says Run as Administrator. That helps a lot to get it to kick off and work properly. And usually once you've done that once, you don't have to do it again whenever you go in and try to activate the program. The software allows you to report all your revenues and expenses for the programs covered by the 6 CFR agencies. You won't be filing a separate CFR for each state agency. In 99% of the time, it's one CFR with all the information for all the programs funded by all the state agencies. In order to prepare the CFR, you're going to have available to you information about your agency and the programs that you operate and the funding sources for those programs, the addresses and the counties where you're in operation. The nice thing about this software is if you've got the latest version and you're working on a 2020 CFR and you get a letter from me saying I need you to adjust something on the 2019 CFR, you can use this same latest version of the software, and the software knows which funding source codes were available for each reporting period. It knows which programs were active for each reporting period, and so there's no need for you to keep more than the latest version on your PC. We update the software twice a year, once for those who file calendar CFRs and once for those with a June 30th end date. There are times when we find a problem with the program, and then we have to, we might also release a patch that would correct issues that come up. As I mentioned before, there are some of you who get to do this twice a year, and if you've got the latest version of the CFR, you could go in and work on or submit the latest CFR, whether it's a full or an abbreviated, and then you can go back, you can do a full for calendar, go back and revise your June 30th mini. You can do it all with the same software. When you're preparing your 2020 calendar CFR, you'll be using version 6 of the CFR program, or I said version 36 of the CFR program. And we expect that that will be released in April of next year. The DCN is really just a file number of the data that you prepared for your CFR. Once you've completed all the schedules you're required to complete, you use that same utility tab and you prepare to upload and you validate your CFR. The validation process will look for errors, and it won't allow you to validate until you've corrected any errors. At that point, a DCN will be assigned. This is late in the process, and even though the first step in the CFR is completing the certification pages, the CFR-I, III, and IV, those are not valid. Some people go complete those certifications and then print them out. Well, they won't have a DCN or a file number at the bottom of the CFR, and so they're invalid when they come to us. So make sure that you do that as your last step, is printing your CFR certification schedules. The OMH webpage is where you download the program. It's also, once you're in the program and you are going to upload a file, there's a button and it takes you here to do the upload. There's also a button here that'll take you to the SED website where you can look at those manuals and appendices again. So this is an important site to have saved on your computer because you're going to want to go here often. One of the important features of this page is the announcement list. As I mentioned before, from time to time, we release patches to correct glitches in the program. And the way that works is anybody who we have your email address, you will get an email saying, hey, we've released a patch to version 36. If you haven't gone in here and entered your email address to get notification, then whatever's the glitch, the program may be causing you trouble and may be a frustrating experience for you, whereas if you'd gone in and put your address in here, you'd have gotten notice, gotten the repaired version out to you, and you wouldn't be having that issue. So it's a good idea to always have at least 2 people from each provider agency registered through the announcement mailing list, so that if one of you hits lotto and is in Boca Raton next year, the other one will get the notice that the software is available. Tips for financial record keeping. It's best if you don't wait till after the period ends before you try to organize your records. So if you can set up your general ledger to mirror as much as possible the way you have to report on the CFR, that's going to make your job a lot easier. There are some staff that split time between different programs or different program sites, and if you are tracking that throughout the year, that's going to be a lot easier than at the end of the period wondering where Joan was working last March. So there are different ongoing steps that you can take as the CFR person to make sure that this process is easy as possible. If halfway through the year you get the units of service from the program director and you take a look at it and it nowhere looks like it's going to match what you did the previous year, then either you've had a change in operations or the person giving you the information has given you bad information, and you need to try to get that worked out with everybody so that when the year ends, you do get the information you need to do this correctly. Another issue is non-allowable costs. which you want to try to track as the year goes along. In order for us to reimburse you, those costs that you report have to be ordinary and necessary for the operation of the organization. And that doesn't mean, there are cases where you'll have a legitimate cost as recognized by the IRS or by GAAP, but it's just not a cost that the New York State agencies are going to reimburse you for. So you need to keep track of those throughout the year. Appendix X of the CFR manual includes a lot of examples of non-allowable costs. And the way it works is you report the cost in the program, say on line 40 or wherever, and then on line 66, if you're in CFR-1, you would report the same description and the same amount, which backs it out again so that it doesn't get included when we're calculating your reimbursable cost for a program. Again, costs that are not properly related to patient care and are principally for the amusement and entertainment of the owners or employees are not reimbursable. So if you have a holiday party every year for your staff, that's likely not a reimbursable expense. If you have a holiday party every year for staff and your clients, that may be reimbursable, although we're never going to pick up the tab, your bar tab. So alcoholic beverages are not reimbursable. If you have any penalties or fines, those are not reimbursable. And it's important, again, that you track these. There are also related party transactions, which will be reported and discussed in CFR-5. We'll cover that later. But if you have related party transactions that aren't reimbursable, you have to go back those out in the appropriate place. It's also fringe benefits sometimes. If you've got special fringe benefits for your executive staff or your executive director that are not available to all your employees, that's likely not going to be reimbursable. An example of that are the 457F executive retirement plans. If you've got a 401k that all staff are eligible for, then that is a reimbursable expense. If you've got special perks or a card for your executive director to commute back and forth to your office, that's likely not a reimbursable expense. And now it's time to do the CFR, and the person, I'm going to pass you off to the person who's going to cover that with you, Alpha.
Good morning. My name is Alpa Amin. I work for OPWDD, and I will cover time to do CFR section. After downloading the NYS CFRS software, an icon is placed on the computer desktop, which will reflect CFRS 36.0 in the center of the icon. To open the software application, double-click on the icon. If there are problems opening the software, try right-clicking the icon and select Run as an Administrator from the list of options. This is the first screen displayed when the NYS CFRS software has been opened. One of the 5 options available must be selected to continue. Make selection by clicking radio button to the left of option. Importing data saves time and ensures that all agency and program definition data remains consistent with the prior period. Click OK to proceed. Importing data. This is to import a CFR from prior version of the CFR software. From the drop-down box, select the version of the software and highlight the file or browse to where the file is located. Select all data, which would include all agency and program site information as well as financial data, or select master data only, which will include all agency and program site information without the financial data. Select yes to the warning and then select import and close. You can import a CFR from a prior version of the CFR software and make changes to the file. If creating a submission of a different type and or a different reporting period, check Change Submission Definition and update the necessary items at the bottom of the screen. Select Validate and then Import. The following are the steps of how to create a new submission. The information required for the new submissions are submission type, state agency, provider number, reporting cycle, and reporting period. The sample shows selection of more than one NYS agency to choose from. User description is optional and is for personal identification purpose in submission directory. Necessary agency information. To complete your CFR, you will need the following information about your agency: legal name, 5-digit agency code assigned by NYS CFR agencies, street address of your agency's central administrative offices, county name where your agency's administrative offices are located, federal employer ID number of your agency, period covered by your agency's independently audited financial statements, name, phone number, email address of your agency's CEO or president, chair of board of directors, and the person to contact with questions regarding cost report and claim schedule. The president, chair of board of directors is not required for governmental and proprietary agency submission. On this screen, bolded field titles are required fields and data must be entered. The school code field is only used for providers submitting CFRs that include SED programs. The period covered by providers' audited financial statement must be entered. Financial statement dates entered will determine whether CFR-iii or CFR-iii will be used for CPA certification. When using the import function, all data elements will be populated except certified financial statement reporting period. Click Save to proceed. You must create a program site before financial information can be entered. There are 4 choices: bring a program site forward from another submission, create a new program site, update an existing program site, and update a DMH-only program. For presentation purpose, we will create a new program site. Program site definition information. To complete your CFR, you will need the following information about your agency's program site: the types of the programs your agency operates, which NYS agency certifies and or funds the program to be reported, the 4-digit program code and 2-digit index for each program site operated, program site identification number for each program site operated. Please refer to Section 8 of the CFR manual for more information about program sites. The physical address for each program site operated, the county in which each defined program site operates. This information can also be imported from another submission. The lower section of this screen is for creating new program sites, and the upper section is for storing previously created program sites. After selecting the state agency in the program line, Use the drop-down arrow to access the list of valid program codes for the NYS agency. Enter the program code index, site code, site name, address, city, state, zip, and the county where the site is physically located. Clicking Save will save the site data entered and allow creation of additional program sites. The site address will remain constant for each new site added until manually changed. Once all program sites for all NYS agencies have been defined, click Save and Close to proceed. To update an existing program site, highlight the row, make the change to the data, and select Save. If during the importing process, you receive an error code regarding a change to the program name, then from the Update a Program option, you should reselect the program to confirm the name change and satisfy error code. Only the required schedule for the CFR submission type selected are displayed on CFR navigation screen. Certification schedule, CFR-iv agency identification and certification statement, CFR-iii or III independent accountant's report, CFR-iii county NYC certification statement, CFR-iv Supplemental Attestation Schedule. The certification schedules requiring data input will be listed first on the navigation screen. All CFRs do not require all certification pages. Refer to Section 2 of the CFR manual for exceptions to the requirements. Electronic submission is the preferred method for submitting the certification and will be discussed in detail later in the presentation. CFR-iv agency identification and certification statement. In the software, non-enterable fields are gray. On CFR-iv, the information in the gray area has been carried forward from the agency definition screen. When importing master data, always verify that the imported data is still accurate and correct. All bolded field names are required. Accurate CEO and fiscal contact emails are especially important. Click Copy Contact if the CFR contact and the stated claim contact person is the same. Click Save and or select a different tab to proceed. CFR-iv is required for all CFR submissions, and it must be signed by your executive directors or CEO. CFR-iv schedule signed by anyone other than the noted parties may not be accepted. The CFR-iv requires contact information for an agency's fiscal contact and president chair of board of directors. It should be uploaded via the CFRS upload page, where it will be distributed accordingly to each NYS agency represented on the CFR. The schedule signed must have the same DCN as the CFR submitted. CFR-iii Accountant's Report. Complete all applicable fields and then click Save and or select a different tab to proceed. CFR-iv or III Accountant's Report is required for most full CFR submissions. It should be signed by an independent certified public accountant, sole practitioner, partner of the CPA firm, or CPA firm that audited and certified the CFR. The CFR-iv or III should be uploaded via the CFRS upload page, where it will be distributed accordingly to each NYS agency represented on the CFR. The signed schedule must have the same DCN as the CFR submitted. CFR-iii or III will be printed based on the auditor's financial statement reporting period entered in the agency definition. CFR-iii when the period covered by the general purpose financial statement corresponds to the CFR reporting period, and CFR-iii when the period covered by the general purpose financial statement differs from the CFR reporting period. Counties and other municipalities have 3 options for CPA certification of full CFR submission types: Schedule CFR-iii, Schedule CFR-iii, and Compliance Review. Refer to Appendix CC for more information on the Compliance Review. CFR-iii County New York City Certification Statement. Complete all applicable fields and then click Save and go to the process. CFR-iii County NYC Certification Statement must be completed if aid to localities funding is received through a local county contract or a direct contract with a DMS state agency. If funded through a direct contract, the Executive Director CEO must sign the far left certification statement designated for voluntary local service providers. If funded through a local county contract, the far left certification must be signed by your Executive Director or CEO, and the far right certification statement must be signed by the County Director of Community Mental Health Service. Counties must have the middle certification signed by the County Treasurer and the far right certification signed by the Director of Community Mental Health Services. CFR-iii should be uploaded via the CFRS upload page, where it will be distributed accordingly to each NYS agency represented on the CFR. The schedule signed must have the same DCN as the CFR submitted. Do not wait for the county signature of the CFR-iii prior to submission. Send a signed copy of CFR-iii to the funding DMS state agency at the same time it is sent to the county. CFR-iv schedule is required as a part of the full abbreviated or Article 28 abbreviated CFR submissions of not-for-profit and proprietary providers submitting to OSS, OMH, and OPWDD. The CFR-iv is a series of questions regarding the fiscal status of agency. CFR-iv schedule is used to report agency identifying data and serves as a certification statement by service provider's chief executive officer, attesting to the validity of the information contained in the document under the penalty prescribed in accordance with the Article 175 of New York State Penal Law. The CFR-iv schedule is not required for SED-only CFR filers, governmental service providers, and many abbreviated CFRs. CFRS Navigation Box will appear highlighting the next recommended schedule to be completed. Schedule can be completed in any order. However, data will not be seen until the feeder schedule is completed. Click Go to Proceed. This concludes my section. There is a next speaker, Michelle Chilinsky.
Hi, good morning. This is Michelle Chilinsky at the New York State Office of Mental Health. Next, we'll be discussing Schedule CFR-4 Personal Services Program Site. Salaries and wages of your employees are reported on this schedule by position title code. There are 2 sections to this schedule. The first is the Program Site tab. The personal services of your program staff, your program administration staff, and your LGU administration staff are reported in this section. To complete the schedule, select the state agency, the program and site from the top of the screen or software, Next, click the Add button and select the position title code. Enter or select the standard work week and enter the annual hours and the annual amount paid for the employees represented in the position title code for the program selected. Next, click on the Agency Administrative tab. The personal services of your agency's administrative staff are reported on this schedule. To complete this section of Schedule CFR-4, click the Add button at the bottom. Select the position title code, enter or select the standard work week, enter the annual hours and the amount paid for the individual represented in that position title code. The personal services related to employees of your agency are reported on this schedule. Individuals who receive W-2s are considered to be employees. The personal services expense for your administrative staff are reported in the second tab of Schedule CFR-4 using the Series 600 position title codes. 100% of the personal service expense for your agency administrative staff must be reported on this schedule. The position title codes are listed in Appendix R of the CFR manual. The positions are listed as functional titles and may not match the corporate titles used by your agency. It is important to match the description of the position title code that best represents the individual title of the employee working at your agency. Some position title codes may be limited to one or two agencies. In this example, position title code 211 can only be used in OASIS programs. The position title codes are located in Appendix R of the CFR manual and are grouped numerically. Support staff are reported in the 100 level series. Direct care staff should be reported on the 200 level series. Clinical staff are reported on the 300 level, and production staff are reported under the 400 level. Program administrative staff should be reported using the 500 level series, and the agency administrative staff are reported under the 600 level series. And finally, local government unit staff are reported using the 700 level series. To delete a line on Schedule CFR-4, highlight the line that you would like to delete and click the Delete button. The standard work week must be at least 35 hours, but no more than 45 hours per week. The hours paid, FTEs, and amount paid totals are shown by column. Where applicable, employees' hours and salaries paid should be allocated to programs and/or position codes. The next slide shows the calculation of an FTE, which is the hours paid divided by the standard work week times 52 weeks. In this example, a part-time employee who worked 22.5 hours per week for 40 weeks totaled 900 hours in the fiscal year, which is divided by the full-time hours for that position of 1,820, which calculates to a 0.495 FTE. The total personal services for the program tab transfer from Schedule CFR-4 to Schedule CFR-1 line 16 on a full CFR, and for an abbreviated and Article 28 abbreviated CFR, that number transfers to DMH1 line 6. The total personal services reported for agency administrative staff transfer from Schedule CFR-4 to Schedule CFR-3 line 1 in a full CFR. Contracted direct care and clinical personal services are reported on Schedule CFR-4A. To complete this schedule, select the state agency, select the program and site, click the Add button, and select the position title code. Enter the annual hours and the amount paid for the contracted services. It's important to note that direct care hours and clinical hours reported on Series 200 and Series 300 position title codes are an important part of the OPWDD rate rationalization formula. It's important to report an accurate total for contracted hours in the schedule. Only contracted direct care and clinical staff positions are reported in this schedule using the position title code Series 200 and 300. Contracted staff include those individuals that are not issued a W-2 by the provider agency. As a reminder, the position title codes are found in Appendix R of the CFR manual. The hours paid field cannot be left blank, and you must enter the annual hours and the annual amount paid for the position title code. Total contracted direct care and clinical personal services carries forward to Schedule CFR-1 line 35 in a full CFR submission. Next, we'll go over Schedule CFR-1 program site data. There are 3 sections to Schedule CFR-1. First, select the General Information tab, which is comprised of lines 1 through 14. Data on lines 1 through 6 and 8 carry forward from the program site definition screen. For Medicaid eligible programs, report both the Medicaid provider agreement number on line 7A and the national provider ID number on line 7B. Both numbers should be associated with the program site being reported. It is critical that the units of service delivered during the reporting period are captured, counted, and reported accurately and correctly. Inaccurate units of service reported is a cause for rejection of a submitted CFR. It is expected that providers will train their staff to ensure that information is recorded at the time the service is delivered, and that the data will be available in the format of the CFR. Program units of service are located in Appendices E, F, G, H, H, and I of the CFR manual. The total units of service is calculated on line 13, which is the sum of line 13A, Medicaid fee for service units of service, line 13B, Medicaid managed care units of service, and line 13C, all other units of service. It's important to note that the OMH units of service carry forward from Schedule OMH-1. Also, the units of service reported for OASIS programs on the CFR must match the units of service reported to OASIS in the monthly service delivery system for the period covered by the CFR. The units of service reported are based on date of service, not date of payment. All units of service provided must be reported, including those for which no payment was received. Next, select the Expenses tab. Expenses and revenues are reported on an accrual basis of accounting on Schedule CFR-1. The following are the expense categories on Schedule CFR-1, which are personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, OTPS, which is other than personal services, equipment, property, and agency administration, which is allocated from Schedule CFR-3. The total program personal services carries forward from Schedule CFR-4 to line 16. Vacation leave accruals are reported on line 17, which are the increase or decrease in vacation accruals from prior year. Mandated fringe benefits such as FICA, Medicare, workers' comp, employment insurance, New York State disability are reported on line 18. and non-mandated fringe benefits such as health insurance, dental insurance, and pension expense are reported on line 19. Repairs and maintenance expense, which includes housekeeping, garbage, and snow removal, are reported on line 22. The costs associated with participant entertainment, recreation, summer camps, and clothing are reported on line 26. Expensed equipment, which is the cost of all program site and or program administration non-adaptive equipment purchased during the cost period with a value of less than $5,000 or a useful life of less than 2 years, is reported in line 28. The contracted direct care and clinical personal services carries forward to line 35 from Schedule CFR-4A. Costs associated with program supplies, medical supplies, printing, copying, postage, computer software are reported on line 36, supplies and material. General insurance is reported on line 39, which includes general liability, bonding, professional medical malpractice, vehicle, or other insurance costs related to program site and program administration. Do not report insurance expenses related to equipment or property on this line. The next slide shows a picture of the line detail expense line 40. Providers have the option of entering expenses on the other expense line by using the predefined lines or by adding additional lines. A common error on the CFR is to report expenses on line 40 other that should have been better reported on other lines. For example, on this slide, rubbish removal should have been reported on line 22, repairs and maintenance, and printing expenses of $1,227 should be reported on line 36, supplies and materials. The OTPS, equipment and property categories each have another line for miscellaneous items. Information is entered through a line details box. Detail is required for expense items greater than $1,000 or more. Expense items less than $1,000 may be grouped together on the predefined line, all items less than $1,000 each. Do not report items on line 40 OTPS other that should be reported on a specifically defined line. Bad debt expense is a non-allowable expense on the CFR, and it is reported first as an expense and adjusted out on the non-allowable line. On Schedule CFR-1, it's reported on line 40 and backed out on line 66. On Schedule CFR-2, column 9, it's reported on line 4 and backed out on line 8. And on Schedule CFR-3, it's reported on line 17 as an expense and adjusted out on line 41. Please refer to the FAQ on this topic on page 8.13 of the CFR manual for further guidance. Certain assets may be depreciated on the CFR on lines 44 through 52. That includes vehicles, equipment, building, and building land improvements. All items with an individual cost of $5,000 or more and a useful life of 2 or more years must be depreciated. Please refer to Appendix O of the CFR manual for additional guidance on the reporting of the depreciation and amortization of assets on the CFR. Non-allowable costs are reported in line 66 of Schedule CFR-1. Negative numbers cannot be entered in the line details box of line 66. Appendix X contains a list of non-allowable costs for CFR, and the amount in excess of actual cost or fair market value for related party transactions disclosed on Schedule CFR-5 are non-allowable expenses and are reported on line 66. Next, there is a screenshot of the CFRS software for line 66. Expenses are entered through a line detail box. To make an entry in this box, click the Add button, enter a description of the expense, the line number where the expense is located on the schedule, and the amount of the expense. Then click Save and Close. Lines 68A through 68E are OPWDD only informational lines. If you receive funding in your Medicaid rate for to and from transportation expenses for the day treatment, day have, or pre-vote programs, then those expenses are to be recorded in detail in Program Code 670 and or 880. Transportation expense is then allocated back to the day treatment, day have, and or pre-vote program sites on Schedule CFR-1 line 68B. Failure to report could result in a significant rate cut. Transportation expenses other than to, from, the home, and site are reported on line 68A. Report on line 68D the amount directly associated with the OPWDD program administration property that is reported on Schedule CFR-1 line 63, total property provider paid. Any agency operating an ICF must report the total billed to Medicaid by that agency plus what is billed to Medicaid by any other agency for the day services provided on line 68E. Next, click on the Revenues tab. Report revenues received from program participants in excess of SSI and SSA self-pay on line 69. Medicaid fee-for-service revenue is reported on line 72A, and Medicaid managed care revenue is reported on line 72B. Revenue from private health insurance coverage is reported on line 74, other third parties. Report grant revenue received directly from an administering federal government agency in support of the service providers programs on line 79, federal grants. Predefined line entries have been added for the Paycheck Protection Program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Emergency Advance Program, and for FEMA grants. Report grant revenue received from New York State agencies other than the CFR reporting agencies on line 80, state grants. Report SNAP revenue, which is Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, on line 82 for OASIS and OPWDD programs only. Report OPWDD prior period rate adjustments on line 86. Report net deficit funding awarded through direct or local contract on lines 93 and 103. Note that net deficit funding can be awarded directly from the New York State DMH agency, or it may be indirectly awarded through the LGU. Report other revenue on line 94. Examples include closely allied entity revenue for OASIS, safety net payments, vital access provider Medicaid revenue for OMH, and assisted supports revenue for non-Medicaid eligible individuals under predefined OPWDD state aid. Report the provision for bad debts revenue deduction on line 97. The provision for bad debts as a deduction from revenue may be reported provided the revenue was not reported net of the provision for bad debts. The presentation of the provision for bad debts on the CFR should be consistent with the presentation on the provider's audited income statement. Also, on Schedule CFR-1, please note that bad debt expense is reported on line 40 and must be adjusted out from line 66. Other revenues, GAAP adjustments to revenues, and non-GAAP adjustments to revenues each have an other category. Information is entered through a line details box. Revenue items of $1,000 or more must be reported with line details. Revenue items less than $1,000 may be grouped together as all items less than $1,000 each. Next, Ken will be continuing with the CFR presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. My name is Ken Glenmeyer. I'm representing OPWDD, and I'll be going over CFR-2 and CFR-3. The screen represents a snapshot of what a CFR-2 looks like. Only column 9 is enterable. Data for columns 2 through 8 carries forward from DMH1. Column 1 is calculated by the software, which is just the sum of columns 2 through 9. Column 1, lines 7, 9, and 10 should match the respective categories in your financial statements. If there's a discrepancy between the CFR-2 and your financials, it should be explained through the input of the reconciliation. This schedule could also be found on page 30 of the sample provided to you guys. The CFR-2 is required for full and abbreviated CFR filers only. It is not required for Article 28 abbreviated or many abbreviated CFRs. The CFR-2 schedule is used to capture total expenses and the revenues that are attributable to the service provider as a whole and to agency-wide schedule. Also reported in column 9 of the CFR-2 is expenses and revenues related to fundraising and special events. Fundraising and fundraising special events are not considered agency administration expenses and cannot be reported on CFR-3. And it is expected that the CFR reporting of fundraising and special events, which will match the reporting in your agency's financial statements. Also reported in column 9 is realized and unrealized gains and losses, management services expenses provided to another provider agency on an ongoing basis. The provider agency totals reported in column 1 will be compared to your financial statement totals. If the reporting periods are the same, any discrepancies will need to be explained in the reconciliation. So when the reporting periods of the CFR and the financial statements are the same, a detailed reconciliation must be submitted with your CFR. Operating expenses reported on CFR-2 are used to distribute agency administration expenses between the CFR reporting programs. Operating expenses include personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, and OTPS, less any raw materials. The reconciliation, which is page 80 of the sample provided to you guys, is not required if the CFR reporting period and the financial statement period are different. If a reconciliation schedule is required, it must be completed in order to pass validation. Governmental entities, Article 28 abbreviated CFR filers, and many abbreviated CFR filers are not required to complete the reconciliation. For required reconciliation, the amount calculated as the difference in the worksheet should be less than $100 in order to pass validations. This represents a snapshot of what you'll see in the software. Line 1 reports the sum of total expenses and total losses as reported in the financial statements. Line 2, which is additions, report the expenses and losses included in the CFR that were not included in the financial statements. Line 3, subtractions. So these are expenses and losses included in the financial statement that were not included in the CFR-2. The window to the right, CFRS line detail, it'll allow you to enter in specific items. The difference at the bottom should be 0 or close to 0. As what I mentioned before, the validation won't pass if it's more than $100. The same situation as the expense side. If you click on the reconciliation of revenues and gains at the top to fill out the revenue section, line 1, you report the sum of total revenues and total gains as reported in the financial statements. Then you would do the additions, which is the revenues and gains included in this CFR-2 that were not included in the financial statements, and then subtractions, which are revenue and gains included in financial statements but were not included in the CFR-2. Some common reconciling items may be reported as additions or subtractions in the reconciliation schedule, such as elimination of intercompany expenses and revenues, depreciation differences. Differing allowable depreciation methods have been reported in CFR and statement of activities expense in the financial statements. And then report any other differences between financial statements and the CFR that are not reported as adjustments, non-allowable costs on CFR-1 or CFR-3. A description should be added with any items reported here. Rounding, any remaining difference between expenses reported on the financial statement and CFR should be reported to the rounding line item that you can see in the right window. CFR-2A schedule must be completed by all not-for-profit and proprietary providers when financial statements are required to be submitted. It is not required for Article 28 abbreviated filers, mini abbreviated filers, and governmental entities. This schedule is used to report data from your financial statements that were submitted in accordance with Section 2 and Section 6, and also data from the underlying year-end adjusted accounting records that support these financial statements. The purpose of the schedule is to collect data in a uniform way in order for each state agency to have it readily available for specific provider and fiscal analysis, as well as industry-wide statistics. Here's a snapshot from the software. Schedule requires specific items from the balance sheet and financial position. This information should agree to your financial statements provided with your submission. The information is very important as it helps us with understanding the financial strengths and weaknesses of our providers. In the next slides, we'll go over certain sections. CFR-2A, Section 28 has been renamed to operating transactions. Line 28A is now used to report operating revenues and operating gains. Line 28B is now used to report operating expenses and operating losses. For 17-18 and forward, the years 2017 and 2018 and forward, line 33, debt management, and line 34, going concern, have been added to the CFR-2A. Other sections include operating capital. This is to provide us with detail of any line of credits your organization might have and outstanding balances. We have restructuring and conversion of debt management. Are you guys meeting all your covenants? If not, do you guys have a waiver from the creditor? And then lastly, going concern. Did the auditors indicate on the financial audit that there's a going concern? If so, you would want to mark yes there. All right, now moving on to CFR-3, agency administration. Agency administration consists of the costs associated with the overall direction of the agency, general record keeping and financial management, governing board activities, public relations, excluding those costs associated with fundraising and special events, as we mentioned before, Direct identification of specific expenses is the preferred method for charging expenses to various functions. Further, indirect costs are those activities or services that benefit more than one project or activity and may require to be allocated. In this case, the allocation methods must be reasonable, consistent, and reviewed by management. Some examples include time studies, square footage, actual use, and percentage of direct cost. And we note that proper documentation should be retained regarding the methods used. Providers should consult with the CFR manual Appendices I and K for that. Also, total agency administration costs for the entire provider agency are reported on a single CFR-3 schedule when completing a full CFR. Note, abbreviated CFR filers complete the agency administration worksheet in lieu of the CFR-3. And the CFR-3 can be found in pages 32 and 33 of the sample and is required for full CFRs only and is also an agency-wide schedule. Next, this is the CFR-3 tab data entry screen, which goes over personal services, fringe benefits, OTPS, and then if you look up top, equipment, property, and ratio value. Similar to the CFR Line 1 items, the agency must fill out the schedule appropriately. All you have to do is click on the different tabs to change to the different sections that you need to fill out. As previously mentioned, it is important to note again that fundraising and fundraising special events are not reported on CFR-3. They're to be reported in full on CFR-2, column 9. And some of the expense categories that go into CFR-3 is the personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, OTPS, equipment, property, and parent agency administration allocation. If parent agency administration allocation is reported on line 38, documentation of the administration allocation must be sent with the certification schedules. This must include total parent agency costs, total allocated costs to each of the subordinate agencies, and the basis used for the allocation. Section 15 of the CFR manual was revised to provide additional guidance on reporting parent agency administration allocation on CFR-3, line 38. Other line items on the CFR-3 consist of audit, legal, and accounting, which includes the cost of other accounting services such as payroll and CFR audit costs. Line 14 could be contracted personal services such as management consulting services, IT support, and more. If items with a cost in excess of $5,000 are reported, they must be listed in a worksheet separately by description and amount. Items costing less than $5,000 each may be aggregated and listed as all items less than $5,000. So, and just a side note too, costs to develop internal use software during the application development stage that are capitalized are not included in line 14. Refer to U.S. GAAP Codification of Accounting Standards topic 350-40 for internal use software, or U.S. GAAP Codification of Accounting Standards topic 350-50 for website development costs. Next is just line 16, which is insurance general. It's just the general liability, bonding, professional malpractice, vehicle, or other insurance costs related to agency administration. Do not report insurance expenses related to equipment or property on this line. This schedule represents the equipment and property tab. And for CFR-3, the provider must fill this out accordingly. The OTPS equipment and property categories each have an other line for miscellaneous items. And information is entered through the line details box. Detail is required for individual items costing $1,000 or more. Individual items costing less than $1,000 each may be grouped together as all items less than $1,000 each. And then just another note, if the total of the grouped items is excessive, you may be asked for a detailed breakdown. Line 41, all agency administration items include on Schedule 3 of CFR-3, which are considered non-allowable expenses. If there are any administrative non-allowable costs reported on Schedule CFR-5, also include them here. The detail of adjustments to reported costs, the corresponding amount and line number where the cost is reported must be entered into the CFR software worksheet for this line. You might want to refer to Appendix X. Please also note that negative entries are not allowed on this line. And then also line 42 is the net agency administration, and it's the amount to be allocated using the ratio value method. Next is a snapshot of the ratio value tab for CFR-3. What's represented here is all data elements which are populated by the software. All calculations are performed by the software, and then the calculated values are carried forward to CFR-1, 2, and DMH-1. So nothing to enter here. CFR-3 ratio value allocation, as I mentioned before, the software completes all the calculations for you. The total corporate agency administration expenses are allocated to all agency funding sources using the ratio value method. The ratio value method uses operating costs of the program sites as the basis for the allocation. Operating costs are defined as personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, and OTPS, less any raw materials. And then Schedule CFR-3 uses a two-step process to allocate agency administration costs. Step 1 of the calculation steps, total agency operating costs are carried forward from CFR-2, columns 2 through 9, to CFR-3, lines 43 through 50, and are totaled on line 51. Line 51 is carried forward to line 53. Line 52 is divided by line 53 to develop the 6-digit ratio value factor on line 54, and then the ratio value factor is applied to the operating cost on CFR-3, lines 43 to 50, to calculate each funding source's share of agency administration costs, and the allocation is displayed on lines 55 through 60. And just please note, operating costs for program codes 0880 and 0890 are excluded from this ratio value calculation. Step 2 allocation is done within the New York State agency shares assigned in Step 1, allowing additional specified programs to be exempted. The Step 2 exempted programs are for OPWDD programs code 0190 and OMH program codes 0860, 0870, 0920, 1230, 1690, 1910, 2740, 2850, 2860, 2980, 6910, 6920, and 8810, and programs with an A program code index, and then which are startups. The adjusted ratio value factors are displayed then on lines 71 through 77. here's an agency administration worksheet for abbreviated filers. This is not included in the sample provided. Agency administration must be calculated using the ratio value method. You enter the total agency administration expenses on line 8, so the highlighted line right there, and then the software does the rest for you. Once again, this is for abbreviated filers. So, agency administration, some final thoughts. All agencies have agency administration expenses. Agency administration expenses need to be distributed to all activities fairly. Ratio value is the required method used to allocate agency administration expenses on the core reports, and then ratio value is based on operating costs. The amounts allocated may differ from the amounts allocated in your general ledger and financial statements. However, you may be asked to explain the differences upon review. In calculating expected administration overhead expenses, hospitals should use the most recent available allocation percentages from the step down derived from the latest ICR institutional cost report submitted to the Office of Health and Systems Management as per Appendix Y. The last slide I'll be presenting some final thoughts. For more information on CFR-3 schedule, please see Section 15 of the CFR manual. For more information on agency administration in general, please see Appendix I, Section 42 of the CFR manual. And then please refer to Appendix T for more information on how to calculate agency administration on an abbreviated CFR. Thank you, and now I'll be handing off to our next presenter, Paul Green.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Green. I'm from the New York State Office of Addictive Services and Support. We're going to talk about the CFR-5 and the CFR-6. So where they differ a little bit from what we've already discussed, we've been talking about the CFR-1, 2, 3, and 4, and those 4 schedules all work together, okay? If you put a number on the CFR-4, it transfers to the 2, and it's associated with the 3, and ends up on the 1. So they're all connected. The CFR-5 and 6 are standalone schedules. If you put a number on the CFR-5, you don't have to worry about it going anywhere else, and the same thing for the 6. They're informational forms. So starting with the CFR-5, it's required for submissions with full abbreviated and mini abbreviated, but not Article 28 abbreviated. The CFR-5 is transactions with related organizations or individuals. From the manual, it says it's used to report all transactions, including compensation, between the reporting entity, its affiliates, principal owners, managements, and members of their immediate families, and any other party or organization with which a reporting entity may deal when one party has the ability to significantly influence management or operating policies of the other, to the extent that one of the transacting parties may be prevented from fully pursuing its own separate interests. So there's 2 things being said there. 1, there's a relationship, and 2, that they have the ability to influence decision-making, okay? So if you hire a security firm and it turns out that the executive director's brother-in-law operates that security firm, that would definitely be a related party. Okay, the brother-in-law has to be at a high enough level position in order to influence your decision making. If the brother-in-law was a low-level employee, then it probably would not be a related party transaction. Okay, so those are 2 things to keep in mind. If you do not know whether you have these, then you should speak with the executive director or the chief fiscal officer to ask them their opinion. You should also probably reach out to the accountant, because the accountant normally includes this as a note in the financial statements. Okay? If you're questioning whether you have to report this or not, you can go back to the CFR manual and get additional guidance. But it's always better to report it if it's questionable, because if you don't report it and it looks like you have it, then it looks like you're hiding something. So my advice would always be to report it. Okay. First question on a CFR-5. During the reporting period, were there any payments to a related organization or individual for our agencies? Okay. You would select yes or no. If the answer is yes, you're going to have to complete Section B and C, telling us what those payments were. If the answer is no, you would go on to question number 2. Question number 2 says, during the reporting period, were there any transactions with related organizations from which the service provider received any financial aid or assistance, or to which the service provider provided financial aid or assistance? The answer is yes or no. If the answer is yes, you have to complete Section D, explaining it further. If you select no to both these questions, then you're done with the CFR-5 and you can move on to the CFR-6. Okay? If you selected yes to the first question, that you did make a payment to a related organization, then you have to complete Section B, telling us what that payment was. So in column 3 here, for the specific program 2100, and then in column 4, a description of the transaction. We rented space, we leased space. 5 is the name of the organization. 6 is the relationship. 7 is the amount of the transaction reported. So in this case, for this program, you paid $68,620 of rent for your program, okay? So column 8 is the allowable cost, and column 9 is the adjustment cost, okay? And then right below it, row 2, for a separate program, is a salary and fringe, and column 4, salary and fringe to Sally Fields, and you ended up paying her $10,200, and then the allowable costs, and then the adjustments, okay? So you've listed the entries, and now it's time to determine what the allowable cost is. What is column 8? So we'll start with Sally Fields first, because that's easier. Salary and fringe, as well as most other things, you are allowed to pay your related party up to fair market value, okay? So if you hired Sally for $10,200, and that's fair market value, you could have got other people for that price, then the full amount is allowable, okay? If you paid her more than fair market value, if you could have got somebody else for $8,200, then the allowable cost would have been $8,200, and the adjustment would have been $2,000, okay? So for salary, fringe benefits, and other things, supplies and such, as long as you're paying fair market value, it's all allowable. All right? Now, going back up to the first row, leased space. It's a little different for leased space. For leased space, the allowable portion is the lower of fair market value or the related party's actual costs in that property. Okay? So, in this case, you paid $68,620 in rent. If you had paid that to Joe Schmo down the road, that would have been all allowable. But in this case, you paid it to a related party, and I'm going to show you in a second where his or her actual expenses were only $67,620. And therefore, there's a $1,000 adjustment that has to be done. We're not going to reimburse you for that $1,000. So that's Section B, and now we go on to Section C, where we list the related party's actual costs. And in row 1, for Program 2100, They had depreciation of $10,000, mortgage interest, insurance, property, other, came up to $67,620. So the related parties' actual costs were only $67,000. You paid them $68,000 in rent, so you have to deduct that $1,000 as a non-allowable expense. Okay. So in this particular case, in the case below it, in row 2, the total expenses were $30,500, and you only paid $30,000 in row 4 here, $30,000, and the allowable is $30,500. So you have enough to cover the $30,000 in rented space, okay? But you don't have enough to cover the full amount of the $68,000 of rented space. Okay, so the $1,000, as I said before, once the CFR-5 and the CFR-6 are standalone documents, and if there's an adjustment to be made, it will not automatically transfer. You have to remember to go back from the CFR-5 to the CFR-1, and you have to go into that program, and you have to put in the adjustment to lease for line 49, $1,000, and that way you're adjusting out the non-allowable portion. Okay. So again, in summary, for salaries and such, it's fair market value. For property costs, base costs, it's the lower of fair market value or the related party's actual costs. Okay. The second question was, were there any financial aid or assistance to which or from which were provided? Okay. If you answered yes, then they want to know the information behind that in Section D. Here it is. It says the name of the related party, the address, the city, the state, the type of support, to which, from which, and the funding amount. A very good example of this would be a loan. If the agency made a loan to the executive director, you would report it here. Or more likely, if the agency was having trouble making ends meet between reporting periods, maybe the executive director makes a loan to the agency, a short-term loan. But anyways, this is where financial aid and assistance is reported. Okay, that's the end of the CFR-5. Again, if you have any questions about it, refer to the CFR manual. Talk to the executive director, talk to your accountant, but you definitely do not want to avoid reporting related party transactions. The CFR-6, Governing Board and Compensation Summary, it's required amongst all the submissions. It is for it's the reporting of the governing board members. All employees reported under Position Title Code 601, 602, and 603. All employees earning more than $125,000 per year, and the 5 highest paid independent contractors earning more than $50,000 per year. So it's required with submissions with full and abbreviated CFRs, but not with Article 28 or mini abbreviated. Section 1, question 1 must be answered yes or no. If yes, then approved software will provide a lines detail box to enter the names. Okay. So Section 1, question 1, do any employees of your agency also serve on the governing authority? If yes, please provide a detail of the employee's name and 3-digit position title code. Well, for not-for-profits, generally, the employees do not serve on the board of directors. Okay? They may sit in on the meetings in order to stay informed on what's going on, but they do not usually have a voting right. Okay? On the other hand, not-for-profits may, and if you have a special circumstance, then you answer the question correctly. So if again, generally it should be no, but if the answer is yes, then you have to report the employee name and their position title. Section 2 includes compensation paid to individuals in their capacity as officers, directors, or trustees of the agency board of directors. So the Section 2 says, list the name of all individuals who receive compensation as board officers, members of the board, or such. Again, for a not-for-profit, board members generally do not receive any compensation. You may reimburse their expenses if they had travel expenses or hotel accommodations or such, but that is reimbursement, and that does not meet the definition of compensation. So generally for not-for-profits, you do not pay your board members. They usually do it they volunteer out of the goodness of their heart. However, if this is a case where you do, then this is where you would report it. Section 3, information on the highest paid employees of your agency, which is everybody above $125,000 and the position title code 601, 602, and 603, regardless of their total annualized salaries. Okay. So as you're looking at this slide, you'll see that row 6, Hannah Johnson, is a 603 comptroller. Amount paid $85,000. So that's below the $125,000, but that's one of the 601, 602, or 603. It has to be reported regardless. Okay. The other ones are all above $125,000, except for row 4, Robert Smith, 604, $112,000. So you wonder, why is that being reported? Well, the reason is they were hired partway through the year, so their FTE is 0.85. If they had worked the full year on an annualized salary, the FTE or the salary would have been $131,000, which would be over the $125,000, and therefore it needs to be reported. So this is a total annualized salary. So keep that in mind. That's Section 3. Okay, going back to Section 3 for a second. Column 9, other benefits. So Francis mentioned a while ago that fringe benefits specific to an executive director is considered a non-allowable expense. So in this particular case, column 9, for the executive 601 executive director, there's a $1,200 fringe benefit, and it was an auto expense. It was for commuting to and from home. Okay, so that $1,200 is a non-allowable expense. Now, had that car come from home and then had the executive director use that to travel around amongst the programs, well, then maybe a portion of this expense would have been allowable. But in this case, it was just commuting back and forth, and it is not allowable. So you have to remember to go back and make an adjustment on the CFR-3 because it's not going to automatically do that. Okay, so you're going to go back to the CFR-3 and you go to line 41, and from the drop-down box, you're going to select and you're going to enter Mary Reynolds Auto Lease $1,200 as a non-allowable expense. Okay. Finally, Section 4 of the CFR-6, it's about listing the highest paid consultants, independent contractors that your agency uses. Okay, it's limited to the 5 highest paid, and they have to be over $50,000. Okay. After you're done with the CFR-6, you've gone through all the core reports, and now the last core report is the DMH-1, okay? So the core reports are the first section of the CFR, And then after the core reports, after we're done with that, we go to the claims reports, which is the DMH2 and DMH3. Okay. So the DMH1 acts as a summary. It's a summary of what you've done to this point. It also acts as a bridge taking you over to the DMH2, the claiming documents. So if you're a full CFR filer, the DMH1 is automatically created from the entries on the CFR-1, the CFR-2, CFR-3, and such, the other core reports. Okay. So if you get to this point and you're looking at your DMH1, and by the way, it should all be grayed out, which means none of the lines are changeable. Okay. But if you see something there that you don't like on your DMH1, you can't fix it there. You have to go back to the CFR-1, 2, 3, or 4, fix it there, recalculate, and then come back to the DMH1. Okay? So it's a summary. It also collapses a lot of the categories. On your CFR-1, OTPS, there was like 40 things under OTPS. There's food, there's staff travel, staff development, there's all these different things. Well, on the DMH1, OTPS is just one row, one number. Okay? So in comparison, it's much easier to look at a DMH1 than it is to look at a CFR-1. So it collapses the categories, and it gives you an option to collapse sites also, if you want to choose that option. Okay? So OASIS never allows you to choose the option. But let me explain what the choice is in case some of the other agencies do ask you to do this. We all ask you to report the programs on your core documents according to the sites that are given to you from our agency. In OASIS case, it's a PRU number. So you may have one program, but you may have 3 sites. So they would be in 3 individual columns. Okay. If the county or the claiming department wants you to combine those 3 sites into one column on the claim, if they ask you to do that, the way you would do it would be the index code. I know you always are asking me what the index code is for my program. Well, this is what the index code is all about. If you have program 3520 and you have 3 sites and it's index code 00, 01, and 02, when it transfers from the core to the claim, they will stay in individual columns. However, if you use index code 00 for all 3 of them, when they transfer over to the claim, they will be combined into one column. So, again, this is up to you to do if you want to do it. The software allows you to do it. If you are not told to combine them, then I would just keep them individual. I would use the individual index codes unless somebody tells you to combine them. Okay. So that's what it says here is if multiple occurrences of a program type have the same index code, the data for that program type will be aggregated into a single column on the DMH1. If multiple occurrences of a program type have different index codes, the data for the program code with the unique index code will be reported in its own column on the DMH1. So the DMH1 is a summary that collapses categories and can collapse sites if you choose to. It will then, whatever is created on a DMH1 will then transfer to the DMH2. Now, if you're not a full provider, if you're an abbreviated or Article 28 abbreviated CFR provider, you did not complete a CFR-1. You start right here on the DMH1. So when you enter the DMH1, all the lines are white, and you just have to fill them in. Okay? The software helps you. It's all the rules that were offered for the CFR-1 are followed here. It's full accrual basis, equipment costing $5,000 or more and having a useful life of 2 years or more must be depreciated. Agency admin is distributed amongst the New York State agencies according to ratio value. It's a 3-tab schedule. The first tab is program units of service and expenses. Okay, and in this case, everything's grayed out, which means it transferred over and you can't make any changes here. The second tab is program revenues. Okay, and as we've done for the other lines, we've updated the drop-down boxes for the federal grants and the state grants to include where to put in entries such as PPP and FEMA grants. Okay. You know that there is a drop-down box next to line 25 and 26 because of the asterisk there. So when you click on 25, it'll go to a drop-down box with the predefined lines. And then the third tab is program adjustments to revenue. And then the line 44, net operating cost. Net operating cost is all your expenses for this program less all your expenses less your revenues received other than net deficit funding. Okay? So net operating cost, total expenses less total revenues except for net deficit funding. Okay? Once you feel good about these numbers, you're looking at this, you've gone back, you've made any changes that are necessary, you feel good, now it's time to begin your claiming. Okay? In order to begin your claiming, I suggest you use the button on the bottom left-hand corner to transfer to your DMH2. Now, it will transfer everything exactly as it is here. And then if you don't like those numbers on your claim, you can go into your claim and adjust the numbers. But by transferring it, it gives you a good starting spot, and it makes it so that you don't miss any categories and such. On that note, I'm going to hand the ball back off to Ken, our host.